In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to color and shade organic shapes in Adobe Illustrator. And this is so important, especially when we're trying to achieve kind of a three-dimensional look. And we're going to be doing three pairs, and we're going to be using three different techniques. And so, like on this first pair here, this is actually done with uh, the Freeform Gradient, which is awesome because it makes it so easy. This is something they added into Illustrator a few years back. The third pair we're going to be creating is using Gradient Mesh, which has been with Illustrator for over 15 years now, if not more. It probably goes back to 20 years now. And it's a great way to shade things, okay? And then the third method we're going to use is we're going to be creating kind of a clipping mask. We're going to use draw inside mode, and we're going to use the shape of the pair to mask out areas. And what we're going to do is we're going to create shapes that we apply Gaussian blurs to establish more of a three-dimensional look, okay? So let's begin here. I'm going to go and do File and New, and that's what you'll need to do. Letter size page, and in this case, 300 pixels per inch for raster effects is essential because we're going to be using those raster effects. And if it's set lower than those raster effects, when you zoom in, look a little jagged, okay? So I just want to point that out. And by the way, if you ever need to change your document raster effects settings, you can always go here and change them here, okay? And so this is very important to know. You can work in grayscale or bitmap. You might be able to work in RGB depending if you bring in an RGB document. I usually work in CMYK, and that's what we're going to be doing for this exercise, okay? So I'm going to close this out. Anyway, what you're going to be needing to do is you're going to need to download an image from our D2L class, and I've uploaded this image of a pear. And we're going to place this pear, and this is going to be used as our reference, okay? And we're going to make it a little smaller because we don't. Now we could use it as a template, but I'm going to just kind of loosely base this on this, and we're looking at the shading. We're not going to be able to get those little dots and everything unless we really went into great detail, which you could do, but really we're just doing the shading. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by drawing an ellipse here, and we're going to fill that with, I'm going to get my eyedropper. I is a keyboard shortcut. We're going to fill that with a kind of a middle color there for that, just so we can see that. And what we're going to do is we're going to add in some anchor points, okay? So we're going to get our pen tool, and we're going to add in some anchor points along this shape. And so the shape still needs to be selected in order to add the extra anchor points. And we're just going to kind of sculpt this shape out. And it doesn't have to be identical. We just want a pear shape, okay? And so it's very easy to kind of move these points around and move them in. And so see, you can already begin to see the pear shape there. And I'm going to bring this one in. Oops. Yeah, if you click inside the shape, you'll select all the anchor points. And so it's sort of essentially you kind of play with this correctly. And this is, whoa! Yeah, you gotta just take your time here. And this is not bad. I could probably work with this shape here. It's pear shape enough. If I really want to play with that more, I could just pull these handles down. And I love to just kind of perfect things. That's my thing here. So anyway, this will be good enough for our exercise. And see, I'm even doing this more. All right, so we're gonna make a shape for the stem, and we're just going to simply draw a shape that has a little curve to it. So we're going to click, and we're using the pen tool here for this one. And at the bottom here, we're going to make another anchor point, and then hold down the mouse button so that we can actually get a curve, and then come back and kill that second handle, okay? And then we're going to come up here and just curve it slightly, and then we'll do the same thing on top here. So we get something kind of like this, And just for the moment, we'll fill it with a color just so we can see it and see if there needs to be any work done on this. I'm thinking it's a little thick, so I might just bring it in just a little bit more here. I think it's fine. All right. Yeah, it's going to be good enough for what we're doing. And let's just zoom out again. So you'll need to zoom in and out. The other thing too is you could always drag your pear very close to it, your JPEG of your pear here. And what we're going to do is we're going to select the pear shape again, and we're going to go to this tool right here. This is the Freeform Gradient tool. And when you click on it, it's hard to tell what it's going to do because sometimes it adds 3 of these things here. This is actually points for where the color goes in, and that's fine. What we'll do is we can actually double click one and get an eyedropper, and then we can click that color there. Also, you can be in eyedropper mode, which we're in right now because we use that. But let's continue on. We're going to actually go and do. I'm going to move this over here, maybe up to here, and maybe this one here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to lines. And what lines will do is you could actually kind of draw a line. And now it's putting in white, but that's okay. We're going to put in color to these lines, and we're just going to curve this around here. We might even curve it all the way up and around so we have greater control, and we can even close it off if we want to. Now mind you, all of our color went away, but that's okay. So what we would do is we'd click on one, we'd come over here to this eyedropper, and we only need to come over to it once, because from then on we just come back, click on a point. The eyedropper is automatic because we're on that, okay? And we'll just continue to kind of click around here and get this darker color. This really works so well. I love this Freeform Gradient. It is really revolutionary as far as trying to shade things that have more of an organic shape. And so, this one right here, since this was a point, we can actually put in like maybe this color here, okay? And we can go into our points here and click on this. I'm just going to move that around here. And then I'm going to add some other points here, okay? And we could do another curvature here if we desire to. But actually, I'm just adding points, as you can see. So you can add points or you can add lines. And maybe something kind of like this. We're going to add one up here. And as you can see, as I'm starting to scroll over some of these, we could delete one. Like if we wanted to delete that one and add another point in there so that we actually have control over that curvature. I'm going to go in and use the eyedropper. And we don't use the eyedropper. See, so we use that eyedropper. It's not really connected to it. That's why we've got to be within the... I'm going back to edit gradient because if you get outside of the gradient, like I did there, you'll need to get back in by going to edit. So we're just going to click on that point there, use this eyedropper, and kind of come over here and get this color. All right, and I'm just playing around here, see what I can get here. And this dictates, like with these points, how far the gradient spreads. Okay, and that's very important here. So let's just keep adding some colors in here. I'm going to get this one right here. Whoop. Move that over. Sometimes they overlap, and put that color in there. I'm thinking, let's see, just working around here, trying to get it to look a little bit more like our pear here. And that's not bad, really. I mean, I could go in and keep adding things, but I mean, seriously, that's really nice. If we want to keep adding stuff, and I just clicked off of it, we go back and edit gradient. And then we could put another point in somewhere, like here, and this point could be lighter. The other thing, too, is this. Our points, we can actually lower the opacity on our points, if we wanted to. And I don't know what that's doing right there per se, but let's actually just bring the opacity back up to 100, and we'll be using that to blend this to make this whole. We're going to be using the transparency thing. But anyway, let me get my eyedropper, and we're going to click in and do something kind of like that, perhaps. Yeah, I mean, it really does a really nice job here. And I'm thinking of just bringing this down here. Whoa, that's cool. All right. All right, I think I've played with it enough. And you can, as you can see, you get a really nice effect there. So let's do the same thing to the stem. Okay, we'll go up here. If we need to, we'll just drag this stem over. Now, here's the deal. As soon as you click on this and you add Freeform Gradient, you don't, like I say, you don't know exactly what you're going to get. This time, it added 3 of these points, okay, which is awesome. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this one, and we'll keep this one up here. We're going to zoom way in here so we can see both of those. Then we got to go back to Edit Gradient because we used the Zoom tool. And we're going to do a line here from here I went to the Stop tool. And that can happen. And like I said, sometimes things just go awry here when you're working on something. And you just kind of, you got to kind of go back here. And I'm trying to get another line here, but it won't do it. And everything is white. So anyway, let's go to Edit Gradient here. And let's add in colors. And we'll just use our eyedropper. And as you can see, as we're getting lower and lower, it's picking those colors up. This actually is kind of nice because it kind of blends it in there. We might have to move that out later, but I'm going to move that over here. Now, I don't know if you'll have the same situation. You're going to, the way it puts points in, it's arbitrary. I don't know how they add points in, but anyway, if we continue on with adding, we'll click off the eyedropper there. Now I'm back on my line, which is cool, which is kind of what I wanted to begin with. And I'm just going to end it here. And, each of these points, and I keep wanting to go over there to pick up the eyedropper. We'll pick in some different colors. Those are not bad there. I think we could probably live with that. And then this right here, this lone point can be this color here. Now, when you're zoomed in, of course, you see it like this. But, the thing is, we're going to zoom out here. And as you can see, it does not look bad at all. It really does a nice job of looking like a shaded stem. And we could add more detail if we wanted to. But I'm going to move on here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and get my pen tool. And I'm going to make a kind of a football shape. Actually, we'll do it more like this. Going towards the bottom of the stem. Or maybe it's an eye shape, we're going to make this kind of shape here. We'll zoom in. And then let's put the Freeform Gradient on it. Okay. And then we're going to put in it gave me 3 points, which is great. That's kind of what I wanted. So I'm going to put in another point here. And this first point here, we'll go and try to pick off a color up here. We'll go to this point here. And actually, you know what? We could actually click off of, we'll click that. We can actually pick up color. Let me just make sure my eyedropper's on. From our existing gradient. We don't always have to go to our picture here, by the way. And so I'm going to go back up here and kind of get that color. And then this color I'm going to actually use a darker brown here if I can get to it. So it's something like that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take this shape, select the whole shape. You could use your main selection tool, or if you got your direct selection tool, like what I do, you click in the middle of the shape, cut it, Command X, click on your stem or your pair. I'm going to click on my stem and do paste in back. And if I clicked on my pair, I would do paste in front, okay? And see, this really starts to make it look like a little hole there, and we can actually, maybe pull these points down here. And I'm just playing around here for just a second here. But it does a really nice job. And if we want to blend it better, we're going to go back to Edit Gradient here. That's where we can actually lower the opacity. So if I lower the opacity here to 20%, that just blends it directly into that color underneath there. And we'll do the same thing to this one. Let me go back to Edit Gradient. Click that one. And by the way, the spread is how big that circle is, as far as how much it's spreading out the color. But anyway, I'm okay with this. This is not bad. I mean, it looks enough like a pear. All right. So anyway, we're gonna copy this pear here a couple of times here. I should have copied it before, but that's okay, because we're going to take this pear and drag it over here, and then we're going to do another one down in here. Wherever you place it on your page, it doesn't matter. Well, actually, we could probably put both down here. If we want to, because like I said, it doesn't matter where they're located at on your page. So anyway, let's take this first pair here, the second one that is, and we're going to do something different here. We're going to go and apply gradient mesh to it, okay? And so I'm going to just click on the pear shape, and we're going to go and do create gradient mesh. It's under object, okay? Object, create gradient mesh. Now it's going to take that color out, which is okay, all right? And right now we've got 3 rows and 3 columns. I'm actually going to do 4 rows and 4 columns, okay? And, fortunately, it doesn't do a bad job at placing the mesh on there. I'm going to click OK. And then what we do is we can get our eyedropper, or use the I key. We're not using the gradient freeform tool anymore, so we have to use the I key. So we're getting the eyedropper from here, and we'll just click on this pair and pick a middle value, a middle color of it, like that. Now, if your points aren't doing right, there is a way to kind of fix that, which I'll talk about in a moment. But what we're going to do is we're going to come over here to this gradient mesh tool, and the tool will allow us to add more points, okay? And so I'm going to add a point there. Whoops, I added it to that. I'll just add a point here, okay? We won't need this football shape anymore, because we're going to use the gradient mesh to do stuff with, all right? So anyway, you can use the gradient mesh tool to select points and move them, or you can use the direct selection tool, okay? And, what these points dictate is how far, because it's dependent upon the points, because those points actually will put the color into, okay? So let's do this. I'm going to use a tool I don't use often, and that is this lasso tool, and we're going to just kind of lasso around the bottom here. Now, if you can use the direct selection tool, hold down your shift key to do this, but I just want to kind of quickly get all these points at once here. And then I'm going to go up to get my eyedropper and click here, and there we go. We start to get shading. Now we can use our direct selection tool and click here, get their eyedropper, and do that. And I'm just selecting points here and coming down in here, and it's just, we can put in more points if we want to. And the thing about adding points is, if you're adding a point, like let's say we add a point here, this will add a column, okay? And if you click on a column, it'll add a row like that. And if you click in the middle, it'll add both a column and a row, okay? Just to let you know. And so I'm going to do something kind of like this, for instance. Then I'm going to drag. We can move these down. See, we can sculpt this around here. And for some reason, the way it's drawing this, it kind of clicks off and on. You can also work in outline mode. So if you have a drawing underneath that's shaded or a picture underneath, you can kind of conform these points to where the shadows are. Okay, so I just want to point that out. But let's kind of continue on here. We'll click that point and maybe get this color here, and then let's use I'm switching between the A key and the I key. Okay, the A key will be the direct selection tool. I'm just picking a color there. And the I key is the eyedropper, okay? And it does a really nice job, I think, of shading something. And I'm going to get the A key and click somewhere up in here. And I just drug that down a little bit. Actually, you know what? I'm going to just get my mesh tool, which I think is U as our keyboard shortcut there for. Yep. And then click on this row here, or this column, and then, change that point there. Now we're going to go in here, zoom in. We can, if we need to, we'll drag our pair down below it so we can take a look and see. Like I said, we're just looking at this for reference. Doesn't have to be identical. Just needs to look pear shape and shaded in a similar fashion. Take these points here. I'm just selecting a bunch of them here, and we'll use our eyedropper and come over here and click that. All right. Same thing here. We'll get this and come over here and click on that. And in the end, you get a very nice looking pair here. We can play around with, like, maybe this will be a little lighter here. And as I said, these well, as I've been trying to say here, these points dictate the color. The handles, by the way, dictate how far it spreads out. Now, if you cross a handle like this, you can get a sharp edge like that, and you may need that in some cases. Okay, but my thing is, I always say, don't cross your handles or your lines unless it's intentional, because sometimes things get tangled up here. And I think this is pretty good. I think I could probably, work with this. I'm going to use my lasso tool again. You know how I like to just kind of keep going here, because I actually enjoy doing this once I get involved in doing this. Oops. Well, that's okay. We just changed that color there, which is fine, because we're gonna go here next, and we're going to go to Object. So we're going to click on our stem, and we're going to go Create Gradient Mesh. And, it's just hard to tell how those mesh lines are going to go. I'm going to go down to 3 and 3. And they're kind of at this odd angle, which is okay. I just want to show you this, and we can color this. But what I want to point out is sometimes you just can't control these things. I'm going to use this right now and shade. I'm going to select all these bottom ones here, all the bottom points. Get my eyedropper, click on that. Okay, I'm going to click on this column here and the points on the outside. I'm just sort of selectively figuring out what I want to do here. That's why sometimes I like the direct selection tool, because it causes you to kind of slow down and think about where you want your points at. And it doesn't look half bad. Yeah, I like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to let's drag my pair image. Let's drag it over closer so we can take a look and see if we can get something. I think it thought I was dragging it into that shape here. All right, so use my direct selection tool again. Yeah, I'm actually improving the shape a little bit, and curve that just a little bit like this. Now everything's going to be a little different for you, so I'm going to show you one other thing here quickly. We're going to get my mesh tool again. We'll add a point here, and then add a point maybe here. Okay, and then I'm going to just put this lighter color in there. We're going to go and get these 2 points, and pick a darker color there. So it kind of does that, and then we can even do that for the sides here. You know, we can try to pick the same kind of color there, and you get a very nice kind of painted look. It's not identical, but if we wanted to make it identical, I want to show you a way, okay? And that is, and you don't have to do this, but if you are having some extreme difficulty where these lines are going, it's hard to predict how they're going to go. So I learned a technique, and actually I just kind of developed it because I was helping a student. And that is, if you're having extreme difficulty, you can always draw a rectangle. We're going to go create gradient mesh on that rectangle. We don't want really too many lines. We want very few, like this is great here, this 3 and 3. And then we click OK. And I'm not going to put any color in yet. I'm just going to kind of use this right here. I can go to outline mode, but the problem is that we lose our image. So if we want to, we could put our image on a different layer. But what I'm going to show you is that we can actually take a shape and sculpt out by moving these handles and creating more of a stem shape this way. And therefore, these inner points will actually correspond better in a way that makes it easier to shade. And the way I came up with this was I was trying to teach gradient mesh to my students at the Art Institute, and I had one student that was going to do a cave, and he wanted to do stalactites and stalagmites, and I thought, oh, that's very easy. And the thing is that every time we drew a shape and we put the points on, they would go haywire. They would go every which way, and I was just getting frustrated. And then I thought to myself, what if we just took a rectangle, and that's what we did, and we sculpted it out. And you could use a rectangle, or you can use an ellipse, and we can sculpt out the shape of a stem kind of like this. And therefore the points will be corresponding a little bit better. And this is not perfect because, I'm just going to be fast here. But see, now these points go in a direction that is far more manageable. And especially up here, because see, these kind of curve outward. And if we were going to shade this one, I'm going to put in some lighter color here, for instance. And then I'm going to put in another column, or another row, that is, by clicking on this. It's best when you're doing this to start off with as few points as possible. You need only ones that really help you out, because the more points you have to move, the harder it is to sculpt out that shape. I'm going to use my mesh tool and add just another little point here, and I know there's a really light color there like that, and so we can make a stem that even looks more stem-like. And it's got some issues, we can go in there and fix that. And actually, you know what? I'm going to leave it. I kind of like it like that, I got rid of my old stem. I'm going to keep this new stem. All right. But I wanted to show you that in case you're having any real difficulty with where the mesh is going. So what we're going to do is, once we have our stem done, then what we're going to do is we're going to lock it. We can go to Object and Lock, or Command 2, okay? And just keep that in mind, because if you ever want to move this pair, you've got to unlock the stem. If you're going to reposition the pair and the stem together. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my mesh tool. This will allow me to put mesh points on the pair underneath the stem, by locking that stem. And what we're going to do is just draw up some things here, and I'm going to click on these points that I just made, and go and just click on the pair itself, and see, that's an easy way to shade it, and it just blends right in there now. And then I can go and hit the U key and add another point back here, and that point will be, let me get my eyedropper, that point will be the lighter color here, like that. And then let's take a look at this thing. And it's pretty cool. It's like I said, I really enjoy it. So So those are two ways we can get a pear shaded. Okay, it's not identical to that, but it looks like a pear. Like weren't looking at the image, we think, oh, that's a pear. Okay, so anyway, let's do the last one. Okay, so the last one we're going to do is we're going to use a mode of drawing called draw inside. So first of all, let's take this shape here, and we're just going to flatten it. We're going to pick a middle color here like this. We may keep that football shape for shading. I don't know. We'll see if we'll need it, okay? Let me go and just click on color for here. Okay, so draw inside mode allows you to create a clipping mask. Now, you can do it with this, but you're only, if you do use this as a mask, you're only going to be able to draw one shape inside, and I've had some issues with that. But what we do is down here, below the color, the stroke and fill, and all this right here, we've got draw normal. Okay, we got draw behind, which I don't use, and now that you see it, maybe you might want to use it, because sometimes if we're drawing underneath the stem, we could go to draw behind mode, like when we're drawing that football shape. Then we got draw inside. We're going to click on that, and it sort of creates this little I don't know, dotted line around it to let us know that we're in draw inside mode. And what I'm going to do is get my pen tool, and I'm going to start to draw inside it. Okay, I'm just going to kind of make a shape like this, and then this shape is we're going to go outside the pear, and that's why it's called draw inside mode, because anything we draw outside of it gets cropped off, which is awesome. And so now I'm going to get my eyedropper and click that dark color, and then let's go, and while that's still selected, we're going to go to Effect, and we're going to go to Blur, and we're going to do Gaussian Blur. And we can dictate how far that blur stretches, which is really cool. I just made that. Now, if we want to adjust that blur, you don't want to go back up here to Gaussian Blur, because this will apply another instance. And as I've stated before in another tutorial, I've had students in the past that were trying to adjust their Gaussian Blur, and they keep adding them, and then the program slows down because every shape they've drawn has 15 blurs on it, and Illustrator's trying to calculate that. So what you want to do is, if you ever want to change the Gaussian blur, you come over to your properties palette. There's also an appearance palette, which I haven't brought up because the properties palette does a lot what the appearance palette does. I don't know why they have both of those, but anyway, we can go to Gaussian blur there, and we can readjust it if we want to, if we want to make it greater like that. Okay. The other thing we can do too with this is we can lower the opacity a little bit. I'm going to click OK. We can always, lower the opacity of this so it blends in a little bit more, which is awesome. And so now, all we got to do is we're going to draw some other shapes here. I'm going to draw a shape here that's actually on the inside of this. And, I could have probably maybe even got my ellipse tool. I know it's a dark shape, but we're going to pick up this yellowish shape here, okay? And then we're going to go to Effect. And if you do apply Gaussian blur, it applies the same amount. So you want to go to Gaussian blur and readjust this so it's not as great of a blur on that, all right? And I'm going to zoom in here. And we're going to do another one here. And I'm just, kind of getting something similar to what's going on there. And then we'll do, Gaussian blur again. And maybe lower this amount. Because the smaller shapes are, the smaller amount of the blur you need, okay? So here's the deal. If you get outside of draw inside mode, it's kind of hard to get back in, all right? If I select my shape with the main selection tool here, it won't let me back in, all right? So I found out if you use the direct selection tool, I think I called that direct selection tool. If you use just the main selection tool, it won't let you do it, but if you use the direct selection tool and then click on the shape, It should let you back in. There we go. Okay, it lets me back in, which is awesome because it used to have an issue with that where it would not let you get back into that. And so, I'm going to just draw kind of a shape that comes in. I'm just playing around here. And yours does not have to be identical to mine, but I'm just kind of just playing around with maybe doing a shape more like this. So we get kind of a different kind of green here. We'll get this green color here. And then we'll do Gaussian blur on it. And we'll up it quite a bit there. And see, we can just keep building shapes and coloring it, If we want to make another shape for this kind of brownish section here, I can just make another shape for it on top of that one. And then pick off this color. It's kind of a brownish yellow or greenish yellow, We'll go to Gaussian blur again. And you can play with the amount of the blur you want, how much you want. You can also play around with the opacity. Okay, I got to click OK before we do opacity, okay? So we could do something like that. And then let's do some little highlights. And we'll just zoom in here. Because you've got a couple of these little highlights here. We don't have to make them look identical, but we could put, with the ellipse tool, we can make a little circle here, or elliptical shape. And we'll just click on that color. It's not quite white. And then we're going to do a Gaussian blur on this. And you see what I mean? It disappears. The smaller the shape, the smaller you want the Gaussian blur to be, all right? And then same down here. And we'll do Gaussian blur. I'm getting a little lost there, okay? All right, so yeah, let's zoom out here. That looks really good. I like that. I'm getting better with this all the time. I've done this about 3 or 4 times, and I forgot about draw inside mode. I was using a clipping mask because you can also create a clipping mask up under here. You see clipping mask? It's not highlighted because I don't have a shape selected. All right, so what we're going to do next is, and see that part we could probably leave. I'm just going to maybe leave that unless we're going to make some other shapes. But let's go and get our stem here, and we're going to go draw inside mode on it, if it will let me. Okay. I think we got to make sure that everything. Let's select it with the main selection tool. I think we've got a It's just there's always little bugs here and there. So like on this shape here, we'll go back to it, and we'll go back to draw normal. All right. Okay. Now let's select this one and see if it will let me do draw inside. Yes, it does. Okay. So fortunately, and by the way, this shape was independent of that, and we had done that shape before we did draw inside. So you saw I had to take that off of there, and then put draw inside on this one. And you might be able to put draw inside on multiple shapes, but it was probably having a problem because of just the location. And we're going to just make a color. We're going to make a shape here. Curve it. We'll go outside of it. And then we'll just pick off some color here. And then we'll do a Gaussian blur on it. Like I said, the smaller the shape, the less of the Gaussian blur we want. And then we've got that little highlight up there. We could use an ellipse perhaps. You don't have to use draw inside mode when you're drawing shapes that are inside, but we'll just keep that mode on. I just want to point that out. We're only using draw inside for those shapes that have to go outside of it. So I'm zooming in so we can see this because this shape is so tiny here. We'll move that up like that. And then we're going to go and do, let's see here, Gaussian blur. And then make that smaller, okay? So this will give you, and then we could actually, take that shape or the whole stem and get outside of the draw inside mode. Go to draw normal. So it takes that off. But there we go. We've got 3 pairs. You know what? In my other tutorials I was trying to do, this one never worked as well, but boy, that looks really good. I like that. you get some really nice effects there. So that's 3 different ways we can shade things and use gradient mesh or use the freeform gradient or use this draw inside and with Gaussian blurs to create these 3-dimensional forms, because we're going to be making a 3D map. Let's see here if I've got any of my recent files that I can pull up here. I'm looking to see. Okay, here is here's a couple of files here. I'm going to show you this bell pepper on a plate. I have a tutorial for this on YouTube if you want to see how I made this, and we'll look at it in outline mode. All right, and so I'm using gradient mesh for the plate because I drew a circle and then applied it. And then there's actually highlights that are actually shapes that have Gaussian blurs. And then for the pepper here, it's primarily shapes that have Gaussian blurs. Okay, and you can see how realistic you can get that. So let me see. There's another one up here in one of my recent files. I saw a shark, and this shark was all used with draw inside. Okay, and we take a look at it. I had a photograph of a shark here. I'll just turn. So that's my photograph right there, and then that's my creation in Illustrator. Okay, and I used to use this for a tutorial where I would teach students how to use that draw inside method. I wonder if there's any more up here that I can point out, because we've got. I'd have to go way inside here to find stuff. But anyway, this should give you a good idea of what we're doing with working this way. And so you're going to be submitting this file. We'll save as. Save on your computer. Name it yourself. And you see this is like the 18th file I've done today. Moyers, we'll call it 3 pairs, okay? Now, I misspelled it one of the times I was doing. I misspelled pair the wrong way. So anyway, 3 pairs. Click save, and then that you would submit to our D2L file, and I'll see what you do. It doesn't have to look identical to what I've done, but you want to make it look kind of like a shaded pair. Okay, so I hope this helps you out.